Good morning, Dog Nation. I'm Brandon Adams, and this is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented today by Breda Pest Management. Fun, busy show for us. It's Mike Griffith, Davin Bellamy coming up in just a moment. We'll also look at the big release from the SEC yesterday involving the schedules for not just 2026, but the next 4 years. So a lot of information released by the SEC. We'll touch on that today. I'll give you a little bit of what Kirby Smart said about the SEC scheduling stuff yesterday. And speaking of Kirby Smart, we're to begin with this today. Really fascinating story from ESPN.com, written by a guy we know and like, Mark Schleybaugh, looking deep at the last 10 years of Kirby Smart at Georgia. In the midst of that story, there is a question that Kirby Smart asks of himself, asks of his situation here at Georgia, that if you're one of Georgia's rivals, if you're one of the programs competing with Georgia for championship success in college football, we would dare say this question should maybe terrify you. We'll talk about why and what as we lead into the big game against Alabama on Saturday. It is all on the way. It is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented by Breda Pest Management, and it begins right now.
Today's episode of DawgNation Daily is brought to you by Breda Pest Management. They handle bugs and critters.
Presented by DawgNation.com. This is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans. Here's your host, Brandon Adams.
Plenty on Georgia and Alabama throughout our show today, including two great guests coming up in just a few minutes. I want to begin, though, with I think it's something that actually sets the stage for Saturday pretty well. Mark Schleybaugh, a guy that we know well, ESPN writer, knows the state of Georgia and Georgia football very well. Schleybaugh has put an interesting story up at ESPN.com that dives deep on Kirby Smart in the event of his 10th year as Georgia coach. Now, it's worth pointing out that here at DawgNation Daily, we're celebrating our 10th anniversary going into year 11. Kirby is in year 10 as the Georgia coach, but nonetheless, the timing here of where Smart is in his tenure out of this big game on Saturday, a chance for ESPN to do and Kirby, I guess, cooperated a little bit, big blow-up story on Kirby Smart. In fact, let me show you the image that you see if you go to ESPN.com to see that. We'll show this on the screen to you. There you go. 10 years of Kirby Smart at Georgia. That's the story, looking at what Kirby Smart's tenure's been like. Smart is not one, even to ESPN.com, and a guy that he likes, Mark Schleybaugh, is not always that interested in being retrospective and looking back, or even really being introspective, looking inward with himself. He's one of those guys that typically likes looking ahead and forging ahead, but he was willing to play along with this a little bit. And in speaking about the fact that they've won a couple of national championships and had some success, thinking back on where he is at this point, I thought that Smart asked a question that I think ought to fire up Georgia fans. I think it ought to, if you are a competitor, if you're someone who's trying to have some of the same success that Kirby Smart has had, maybe hoping that his grip on the sport is going to loosen or be let go of at some point in time. I think this story at ESPN.com ought to fill you with fear, ought to make you terrified that maybe Kirby Smart doesn't have any intentions of slowing down anytime soon, including this Saturday against Alabama. Let me show what I'm talking about here. I'll read this to you directly, and we'll go full screen with that if you don't mind. He says, looking back on 10 years, he says, I don't like looking back because I like looking at it as it is, as what can we still do, he asks. If you told me that was 10 years would entail a couple of national championships, he means, I probably would have said, well, could we have done more? There'll be a time to reflect on this, but it's not now. Now, we can leave that up for a second because let's go back to the other one if you don't mind, and leave that up for a second if you don't mind, because I think both of the questions that Smart asks there are fascinating from the standpoint of a Georgia fan. Smart says, what can we still do? We've won 2 national championships, won the SEC last year, become a fixture in the college football playoff, but is there even more that we can do than we've already done? You know, the idea that Smart plans on slowing down, that Smart plans on resting on his laurels. Of course, we know that's not the way the Kirby Smart would be. This quote to ESPN would certainly lead you to believe just how true that really is. Is there more that we can do compared to what we've already done? Then he goes on to say, if you would have told me in the past, and we'll go back to the other one again, if you'd have told me in the past that If you told me in the past that one day I'm going to win 2 national championships at Georgia, I'd be left to wonder, well, could we have done more? Could we have done more? So in other words, it's an unprecedented level of success for Kirby Smart at Georgia. It's been an amazing run through all of this. But he says, hey, could 2 national championships have been 3? Could it have been more? Could however many trips to college football playoff been even more than that? Is there even more success than we could have had that we haven't had already? I find that to be a fascinating question, and I find that to be the sort of thing that I think the Georgia fans will probably enjoy, but those that compete against Georgia, frankly, are probably terrified by. And they should be anyway, because it shows that Kirby Smart, even going into his 10th year as the Georgia coach, is just as energized as he always was. Now, let me talk more broadly about this just for a moment. So here's what we think this means. That as you look ahead to future years for Kirby Smart, as you look ahead to what the next chapter is that in many ways will also be playing out on the field against Alabama on Saturday, you're left to wonder, is there a chance that this legacy that Smart's already crafting for himself, are there more additional rich chapters to add to this? Is there more championship success? In other words, there is a chance, and it's not unimaginable, there is a chance that Kirby Smart really is on the way to being not just the best coach in college football right now, but much like the guy he replaced in that position, Nick Saban, that Kirby Smart's going on to one of these dynastic legacies like Nick Saban had, where Saban, I think, in all conversations, is rightly probably considered the greatest college football coach of all time, that Kirby Smart, as young as he is, as much success as he already has had, could be on his way to a similar level of success. That is very much a possibility, and that's one of the reasons why Georgia fans like this sort of thing. And frankly, it's one of the reasons why Georgia fans are looking as forward to Saturday as they are, because it provides another chance to prove all of that, going out there and vanquishing what some people feel is almost like Kirby Smart's kryptonite. You've heard it said this way. Georgia has not had the same level of success against Alabama. This is a chance to correct some of that here this particular weekend. And a coach like Kirby, who is, based on these quotes, as fully aware of his legacy as he is, well, clearly he's ready to attack this in full measure and with full attention, with full energy. Of course, you'd expect that to be true. But if we're being honest, and this is where the conversation has to shift just slightly, that if Kirby Smart says, hey, could we have done more in the past? Can we do more in the future? Am I, he didn't say this, but to restate it a different way, am I on the way to being the sport's next Nick Saban? You also have to look at the opposite side of that same coin. You have to acknowledge that while it's possible that Kirby Smart is the next Nick Saban, and he does go on to have this collection of championships that leaves his greatness unquestioned, there is also at least some chance that he's also the next version of what Dabo Swinney has proven to be at Clemson. Now, we don't think that's going to be the case. We certainly hope that's not the case, but you have to consider all possibilities here. And Swinney's had a great career. It's 2 national championships. It's many, many trips to the college football playoff. But at least in terms of that level of success, there are a lot of people who are looking at the situation at Clemson right now, given the fact they've already lost, 3 times to begin the season. People are wondering, well, is that version of Dabo, is that version of Clemson, is that just over? And is it going to be impossible for Dabo to regain the greatness that he once had? Dabo said last week, I'm only 55. I plan on doing this for a lot longer. But I think a lot of folks are rightly wondering if, even if Dabo keeps on coaching, has his ability to coach at the top of the sport, has his ability to be considered one of the great coaches in the sport while he's still doing it, has that slipped away from him? So it is fair to ask the question of, as Kirby Smart moves into the next phase of his career, what Georgia fans hope is at least another 10 years on the job, if not more than that, how does Kirby keep the climb going to be the next Nick Saban, and how does he avoid the pitfall of becoming the cautionary tale like what it seems like Dabo Swinney might be, which is greatness that came to an end far sooner than others wanted it to? And I don't think that's an unfair question. I think it's one that might have a specific answer, and I think it's interesting to note that Smart himself, I think, is arriving at what that answer is and what the next phase of his career is going to look like. Let me show you one more from this story. Mark Schlabach, ESPN.com. Schlabach writing here to say that Smart says the transfer portal, NIL, and revenue sharing have forced him to become more of a CEO the past few seasons. While he might have spent hours analyzing film and developing game plans with his assistants in the past, he's now more focused on roster management, player retention, recruiting, and fundraising, while delegating more responsibility to his assistant coaches and his support staff. So in other words, as the job of leading a program becomes more about how much money do you have to spend, where do you choose to spend it, how do you make sure that the money's going to the right places, that task is so significant that some of the stuff related to our particular game plan, in-game coaching decisions perhaps, or just the nuts and bolts of being a coach, what I'm sure Smart always imagined himself doing, that Smart tells Mark Schlabach from ESPN.com that he might be doing less of that sort of thing right now. And we would intuitively understand that to be true. The job has just gotten so big. And Smart, during the offseason, made it clear several times that he doesn't want a GM. He doesn't want anybody doing the personnel role for him. He wants to be able to make those decisions for himself. And we would say right now, there's no better person to do that. But as Smart does delegate some of the on-field coaching stuff, the day-to-day practice and football stuff, as he delegates that and focuses more on the money part of the game and how that money gets allocated to the players on his roster, this will become a big way in which Smart is evaluated too. The opinions that people have about Smart will be impacted by the kinds of talent that Georgia has on the field and how that talent performs in games. And to go back to the original question of, are you the next Nick Saban or are you the next Dabo Swinney? How Smart manages this phase of his career, what he does to bring the right talent in, keep them paid, to keep them happy and keep them performing, this is going to determine whether Smart takes the Saban road or the Swinney road in terms of his overall ultimate legacy. Now, let me drill down on exactly what this looks like for Georgia on Saturday. That there are a lot of Georgia fans, and I would say rightly so, they go into this game wondering, how are some problematic areas through the first handful of games for Georgia this season? How are those areas going to perform on the field on Saturday? For instance, let me start with this. We know that Georgia's had some major issues with its offensive line. Even what was otherwise a dramatic and thrilling win for Georgia against Tennessee, the right side of Georgia's offensive line in particular had some real issues. And in solving those problems going forward, there's a chance that a guy like Dontrell Glover, a guy like Juan Gaston, two freshmen both, may be called upon to help be the solution there. That Georgia not turning to veteran, experienced players to fill a need, unlike what it would have had to do in the past, it may be forced to turn to guys who are a little younger, guys who haven't quite done this before, and just sort of hope they're ready. Last night, for the final time, by the way, on a Tuesday night, at least on a weekly basis, Smart spoke about anticipating this moment was coming for the program where it would have to turn to guys in these spots along the offensive line that just weren't quite so experienced and hope they were ready maybe for the task they're going to see on Saturday against Alabama. This is what Kirby Smart said about that.
Yeah, good instincts, good size. They both have good strengths. They came from good high school weight programs and opportunity. I mean, if they were here last year or 2 years ago, I don't know if they would have. We've had a large group leave, in terms of two things, draft, and we had several portals. And when you lose that in one position, it's hard to replace. Like I have seen this year coming for 2 to 3 years in terms of a gap. Just didn't know when it was going to hit because of Dylan and some of those guys had extra years.
So when Smart says, hey, I'm delegating more now so I can do more of the big picture CEO style stuff, what he says there at the end is the sort of thing we would be led to believe that Smart wants to focus on. A couple of years from now, who's not going to be here? Therefore, who do I have to have ready? Smart says we anticipated there'd be a year in which we would have less developed depth, experienced depth with our offensive line than we had in the past. And you would be led to believe that Smart's been preparing for this moment over the course of that time. Well, Saturday is another chance for that for that test to be passed one way or another to see if Smart has allocated his funds in the right way to give him a chance to have at least 5 offensive linemen that can play winning football for him. And if that doesn't work out, sometimes fans want to fixate on, well, what's Stacey Searles' role in all of this, or whatever other somewhat soft target they might identify that they can easily go on social media or message boards, whatever else, that you can beat that guy up without getting too much pushback for what you had to say. But the truth is, based on Smart's own words at ESPN.com, if for whatever reason the Georgia offensive line isn't better against Alabama than it was against Tennessee, if it doesn't hold up in this big football game, look, it may be that it's not Stacey Searles' fault. It may be that money that could have gone to experienced veteran offensive linemen to make sure that position was as good as it needs to be, maybe those funds were just allocated in a little bit different way. And maybe the evaluation of what is or isn't when it comes to Georgia offensive line isn't as much about the position coach as it is about the big personnel decisions made by Kirby Smart that led to the money being spread out the way that it is. You at least have to consider that as a possibility. Same thing for another area in which we're not quite so sure about Georgia. When it comes to the pass rush, Georgia has not had much pass rush this season. Now, I think it's fair to point out, well, when you play a team like Tennessee, hard to get off the the block quick enough to get to the quarterback before he gets rid of it. Tennessee is notorious for trying to get rid of it as fast as they can, and that's probably, I think, a fair assessment of that situation. But that can't be the story for every game this season, because you can't be as good a football team as you want to be if you're not having some pass rush. And once again, last night, Smart talked about the hope that maybe against Alabama, there'll be more opportunities to create it than there were against Tennessee 2 weeks ago. This is what Kirby Smart said.
Yeah, they're hungry. They're ready to get after it. They want a challenge. They want to, it was tough, Tennessee. We didn't have many third downs. We didn't get in many passing situations, playing from behind most of the game. They did a good job picking things up, but I'm excited to see these guys go play. I mean, they want an opportunity to go play and get after it, and it's going to be a fun game. They got a really big physical offensive line. They can maul you and bully you. They're big and they're physical. And they got big, good backs. So it's going to be a great challenge for our front against their O-line.
I'll say the same thing about this, said about the offensive line a moment ago, which is that I have every reason to believe the Georgia pass rush will be better against Alabama than it was against Tennessee for all the reasons we just discussed. But for some reason, if that does not quite take place, I don't know that the finger gets pointed at Chidero Uzodiribe or Trey Scott or Glenn Schumann to say, the Georgia defense has slipped. I think the Kirby Smart is telling you, I'm spending a lot of my time in the talent acquisition and the talent retention place right now, taking the revenue sharing, taking the NIL, spreading the money around where it needs to go. And if you see an area on Georgia's roster, in Georgia's performance that's deficient, I think the number one question to ask is not why the players that are there were maybe not coached up as well as they could have been, although that's certainly part of it. The bigger, more pertinent question might be, did Georgia spend enough on this position to have a reasonable expectation for success at the position? So let me sum all this up this way. I love the story from Mark Schlabach, ESPN.com, about what the 10 years of Kirby Smart have been. And I love the idea that Smart is, as he said, just as hungry to have more success in the future as he has in the past, that he's not satiated at all. We love that. Fire, passion, and energy. Smart, as he likes to talk about, putting it on full display in the story to ESPN.com. And as he puts that on display in Saturday's game against Alabama and the rest of the season and all the seasons that are going to come after that, Smart also tells you within that story how his greatness as a coach is manifesting itself right now. Stepping back a little bit from the nuts and bolts, button pushing, the day-to-day operations of a coach, delegating more there so that big picture, he can have full command and control of the roster that Georgia's putting on the field. Now, we believe there's no better person to be doing that for Georgia than Kirby Smart. But as you see the performance take shape against Alabama and in future Georgia games, that the results you get are a reflection of the money that's being spread out. And for right now, that's what Kirby Smart says job one is for him. My name's Brandon Adams, and this is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented by Breda Pest Management, We are glad you are here. Happy that you are with us today, whether it's video, live 10 a.m. across all platforms after that, radio, Athens Sports Radio 960 The Rep, podcast, wherever you find them, including the world-famous DawgNation.com. Big thanks to our friends at Breda Pest Management who make it all possible for you here today. Of course, saving you money when it comes to your pest control, putting more money back in your pocket, that's a big thing that Breda does for you. It's one of the reasons why I love recommending them, because I really believe around here that it's important for us to have sponsors that actually make the lives of our audience better. And that's one of the reasons why I offer such hearty recommendations, because I do think our folks can benefit you in so many ways. Of course, saving you money on something you have to have, like pest control, like termite protection. Of course, that's an important thing, and that's what Breda Pest provides. So I want you to reach out and be in contact with a company that's been in business since 1975. That's multiple generations of success, by the way, for the Breda family. 125 employees out there working hard every day. I see their trucks all the time. They're out there doing good stuff. They want to do good stuff for you, including putting more money back in your pocket when you trust them for your termite protection, your pest control, and everything else. It's online, BredaPest.com. BREDA, BredaPest.com for a lot more on that. All right, I don't like to talk about myself, so I'm not going to do it very long, but since some of you have asked, and obviously you probably notice, I still sound pretty terrible. I can't help that. So let me give you a couple of notes, and then after this, we're not going to talk about this very much at all. So did go to the doctor yesterday. I've got to go back to the doctor on Monday. So Monday's show, day after Alabama, makes me sick. It just makes me absolutely sick. But I won't be here. So we'll have a show, of course, but it won't be me. And I can't stand to ever miss a show. I've had one sick day in 11 years. Maybe that's why I can't talk now. But either way, one sick day in 11 years. We don't take off. Don't get sick. Don't experience discomfort. Simply just don't participate in that sort of thing. But obviously, I don't sound good. So went to the doctor yesterday, going back on Monday. Pulling back from a couple of things, a couple of the weekly radio appearances, things like that I make, pulling back from some of those right now, just trying to rest the voice where I possibly can. We'll try to do that again some on Sunday. Been doing that last little bit. And then after Monday, we'll see what it all looks like after that. Many of you have been very kind. Some home remedies are helping me a little bit, but it's still just not, I just can't quite find the extra gear that I'm used to having. It's a huge distraction while I talk, just to me, because I'm thinking about it the entire time. So you're very kind to be patient with me through this. We're going to obviously fix it, get it fixed. Committed to doing that, but just want to give you a quick heads up on that. So if I sound different, that's why. You probably already know that if you've been with us, and just know that I'm not just going to grind this to a halt, grind this until I can't speak. We are working behind the scenes to do something about it, and we'll give you more updates as it becomes relevant. So that's the story basically on that. For now, though, let's get ready to go around the doghouse. Presented today by our friends at Georgia Farm Bureau. Interesting stuff coming out of the SEC last night. We knew we were going to find out about the 2026 schedule. Maybe I was the only one that didn't know this. We knew we were going to find out about the 2026 schedule. We had the leak of the permanent opponents. Some folks online saying this was a way of distracting from the official error in the Auburn-Oklahoma game. Everybody's always got a theory about something. I don't know if that's true or not. But in addition to learning the annual opponents for Georgia the next 4 years and seeing who it's going to be playing in 2026, we also got 4 years of schedules for Georgia here. So let me run through this here a little bit around the doghouse, presented today by Georgia Farm Bureau. Let me start with 2026 here for a moment, just simply because we knew this was going to look like a very different schedule for Georgia. Playing some teams you don't play very frequently. And for the most part, that is true. I guess the most notable thing here is the fact that Oklahoma is coming to Athens next year. Now, we don't quite know how good year-to-year Oklahoma is going to be right now. They seem to be a little up and down. Obviously, the John Mateer injury is also a big deal here, too. But nonetheless, Oklahoma coming to Athens next year, I think that's a marquee home game. Georgia also has to go back to Alabama. Some Georgia fans are rightly frustrated about this because that'll be 3 trips to Tuscaloosa in, 7 years' time? That seems like kind of a lot, especially given the fact that Alabama's coming here for just the first time in, 10 years? So Georgia fans probably right to be upset about that. But all in all, I will say, compared to the schedule that Georgia's played the last couple of years, this does not feel like that daunting of a schedule compared to what you could play. Now, as I said before, we don't know how good some of these teams are going to be. Vanderbilt's better right now than it's been in a century. Missouri's pretty good right now. Year to year, they're kind of up and down. South Carolina is probably not as good this year as they were supposed to be. Ole Miss, depending on how the transfer portal plays out, that's a bit of a crapshoot for them. So ultimately, what is and isn't an easy schedule is a little bit hard to determine. But overall, even with the road game at Alabama, if you're a Georgia fan, I don't think you have much to complain about on that. Of course, we always find something, but I don't think you have much to complain about on that. I think that's probably pretty interesting. And then we'll more quickly do some of these others. In 2027, the big story is, for the first time, Georgia will go to Texas A&M. Also, keep in mind that next year and then the following year, those are the two one-off years for the cocktail party. 26 is in Atlanta, 27 is in Tampa. Worth keeping that in mind. The big deal about 27 is, and we knew eventually you're going to have one of these years where there will be massive travel. Tampa's a good bit farther than Jacksonville. You go to both Texas and Texas A&M. You also go to Kentucky, which is slightly farther than some of the other Eastern Seaboard style teams. Auburn, the closest road game possible, will also be on that slate. But that's a lot of travel in 2027. That's worth keeping in mind. Also, not a bad home slate if it includes both LSU and Tennessee for 2027, and South Carolina too, depending on how good they are. Probably not bad. 28 and 29, like I said, we'll bounce through these pretty quickly. In 28, you get Alabama coming back in. That is the benefit of all this, that the home games rotate in and out every 4 years now. So you're going to see other teams more frequently. And Georgia, as it was supposed to do in 2023, will actually make a trip to Norman, Oklahoma in 2028. Same year it also goes to Missouri. So two very long road trips. And y'all, this is just what the SEC is now. The average miles traveled for your road game, we told you, is going to go way up. This is an example of that. By the way, 28 will also be the return to the brand new stadium in Jacksonville. Essentially, it's renovated, but it's basically going to be a brand new stadium. You'll be seeing that for the first time. Then finally in 2029, you get South Carolina, Kentucky, Texas A&M, Texas. So Texas rotates as a home game once again there. And then you'll go to Auburn, LSU, Mississippi State, and Tennessee. So that's the story there for 2029. Ultimately, here's what I'm going to tell you. There is a lot about the changes to the SEC in particular and college football overall that sometimes we're a little skeptical of. We don't mind telling you that. But at the same time, we also don't mind telling you when things seem to be an improvement. And overall, those schedules we just read out for Georgia, don't they seem slightly more interesting than some of the schedules that Georgia played for years? I mean, a pretty common complaint we heard for a while, and you don't hear this anymore. A pretty common complaint that we heard was, Georgia doesn't play very interesting home games. Georgia's had this awful home slate. At one point in time, that's what we heard. Now they have interesting home games. People say, well, the games have gotten too expensive, and that's a different topic for a different day. But the days of Georgia not having a very sexy home slate, exciting games to be played, we just don't say that very much anymore. The schedule overall has gotten better. And for those of you that like to travel to some of these games, the kind of trips you can take within SEC play, boy, that's really interesting too. You get a chance to go to some places you don't go to frequently and just have a week-to-week schedule that's hard for the team, hard for the coaches, hard for the players. That's certainly true. But I would say much more entertaining for fans overall. It is also interesting to note that, the SEC, unlike almost every other sport, and college football in general is kind of like this. We said this the other day, NFL organized geographically with its divisions. Major League Baseball may be about to undertake a huge realignment to do a lot of what it's doing around its division, its geographic, doing away with national and American, making things a lot more geographically based. It seems like college football is the only sport right now that's going the opposite direction and disregarding geography. You are not necessarily playing your closest teams more frequently. In the case of your annual opponents, that's somewhat true, but not necessarily overall. Just an interesting footnote. What otherwise, I think, an improvement for the SEC. You add 2 power programs, add an extra conference game, and the sorts of games that people like to watch, there are now more of them. I think that's overall a pretty good thing. But it is a challenge for the coaches and players, and that's something that Kirby Smart talked about last night. Let's hear from him one more time on that.
It doesn't matter how you do the schedule, it's hard. I mean, it's brutal. And everybody's the same. I mean, we all got to play each other. It's really tough. Highly ranked teams, physical teams. It's just going to continue to be a grind. I mean, looking forward with the nines coming, it's going to be scary because you just don't have enough. Nobody has enough depth.
So listen, I don't think this impacts Kirby Smart, but it will impact some coaches. That the difference between making the playoff and not is going to cost some coaches' job. And the extra loss could keep you out. This is why so few coaches, or at least a good number of SEC coaches, weren't in favor of the expansion. This is also true of those that are just hoping to make a bowl. Think about the Kentucky, Arkansas, Mississippi State quadrant of teams. They're just hoping to make a bowl, and their coaches stay in good standing because of what do they make a bowl, do they not? Well, more conference losses mean fewer teams, or at least a team that could have been bowl eligible likely might not be. That's going to cost some coaches their job. So coaches, by and large, I do not think are excited about this change, but it is a benefit to the fans. It does make the games more entertaining. It's going to probably make the league a good bit more money, so probably worth paying attention to that. But in 2026, the year that matters most, seems like, well, you still got to go back to Alabama. Overall, on paper, best I can tell, maybe a more favorable schedule than what Georgia's played this year or in 2024. So something worth considering. SEC drops 4 years of schedules last night. Georgia knows its 3 annual opponents, South Carolina, Florida, and Auburn, and it's now going to rotate through the rest of the league, both home and away, over the course of a 4-year period. That's also around the Doghouse. It's presented today by our friends at Georgia Farm Bureau. Now, we're homegrown around here, and we love that. We love the fact that Georgia as a state is known for its agriculture. Farmers that are raising food and growing cattle and doing great things like that all across the great state of Georgia. And we love those who support Georgia's farmers. That includes our friends at Georgia Farm Bureau. They're always the home team. And for a long time, the way that's shown up in the lives of the agriculture community, it's supporting them when it comes to, oftentimes it's fundraising initiatives and things like that, especially in tough times. We've talked to you about that in the past. But it's also just your basic needs, things you have to have, like home insurance or life insurance or auto insurance. Legally, you've got to have, certainly in the case of auto insurance, you have to have that. Well, you want to work with a friendly company, and that's what Georgia Farm Bureau is. That's when we say they're always the home team. When you pick up the phone and call, you're going to speak to a Georgian on the line who lives in a community in Georgia just like yours. Claims adjusters, they're the same way. And the same support they've been providing to Georgia's farmers for a very long time, they can provide that for you now too. So work with good folks. Work with Georgians just like yourself. Friendly people. It's our folks at Georgia Farm Bureau. Give them a call, 877-404-1050. That's 877-404-1050. You can also find them online, gfbinsurance.com. Georgia Farm Bureau is always the home team. All right. Before we're done, it's a deep look at what is a very deep slate for Week 5 in college football. We'll give you some of that. We'll also hear from Davin Bellamy. How does this Georgia defense get cranked up for Saturday? But for now, and everything else going on with Georgia football, including the schedule release from yesterday, let's talk to Mike Griffith here today, DawgNation Daily, presented by Breda Pest Management.
From Athens and across the SEC or wherever the recruiting trail may lead, here's a DawgNation.com insider.
Mike, SEC schedules released for the next 4 years yesterday. Georgia knows its annual opponents. It knows its 4-year rotation. I complain about a lot of things. I didn't have a huge problem with it. Yeah, you got to go back to Alabama next year, but you're going to be playing these teams all the time anyway. This is a little bit different for me than, 2011, 2012, and Georgia went to, no, I guess it would have been 2012, 2013, whenever it was, when Georgia went to Auburn in back-to-back years. A little different for me than that. Overall, based on what the best guess we have about the competition that Georgia plays in 2026, seems like a more favorable schedule than the one it's playing right now or the one that it played in 2024. 27 through 29, it's almost too hard to even know much about that other than Georgia's about to travel a lot and see a lot of SEC teams more frequently than it's seen them in the past. What do you make overall about the scheduling release?
Well, I think just seeing it in front of us, Brandon, we know that next year that Georgia has an imminent decision as far as what game they drop, right? We know there's 4 non-conference game schedules and they can only play 3, Tennessee State. We know Georgia Tech is going to be played. We know that. Out of Tennessee State, Louisville, and Western Kentucky, you can only play 2 of those teams. I'm afraid, and I say I'm afraid because I like good games. I don't know about you, but I don't think you can keep the Louisville home. I just don't. I think when we look at the level and the depth of the competition, particularly having to play in Tuscaloosa, to me, it's where I go, okay, yeah, that's it. You can't keep Louisville home and home. It's too much. It's attrition. We have seen this act before. We saw it last year. We saw how it hurt Georgia. We saw Georgia limp through a season, somehow win an SEC championship. You're not going to be able to do that every year. It was an amazing job, and yet still, I would say it also affected Georgia in the college football playoffs. So to me, I think this makes the decision for Georgia. I don't want to see the home and home of Louisville go away, but to me, that's the net effect for me. Seeing that game in Tuscaloosa made me say, you know what? They can't keep Louisville home and home. It's just too much.
Well, you're not going to cancel either of the two, what you call bye games, because you got to pay those teams anyway. So you're not going to do that. You're going to negotiate a hard bargain with Louisville so that you can just cancel without having to pay anybody. If I had to guess, that's what Georgia's going to do, because if you try, I forget what the other two you said were, Tennessee State, whatever else. If you tell them,
Kentucky.
if you tell them you want to cancel, they'd be like, okay, that's fine, but you still owe me $1 million.
Yeah. No, you'd have to buy it out. So here's the question, and this is where I'm going to take you because I want your opinion on this. I know you asked me questions, but I'm really hot on this idea. Lane Kiffin was talking last week about how the NFL playoffs and you can get teams in 10-6, 9-7, etc. And this was in reference to the 3 lost teams that didn't make the playoff. A couple of weeks ago, when I asked Kirby about the 24-2018 model, he said, yeah, if it's done the right way. Where my brain goes is, if we want to see the future home and homes with Florida State, Ohio State, Clemson, that are on those way off schedules, if you go 24-28, you can do that. Kirby mentioned yesterday that you could manage your team differently if the playoff structure was different. I really feel like more revenues generated, coaches can maintain a stronger schedule, and more fan bases are engaged, higher TV ratings, more revenue. Where do you stand on that? Because we know 12 teams isn't going to stay. We know that now that the SEC is playing a 9-game schedule, which was the Big Ten ask, we know that they can move forward with at least 16 teams. What is your thought on when we get to 24-28? Do we get to 24-28?
I certainly hope not. I don't hate the 16-team models that have been thrown around, like the 11-5, where you have 11, at large and the 5 automatic qualifier. I don't hate a 16-team playoff. I think a 24-28 just sounds gross for the very reason that the other coaches are alluding to. Coaches don't like the ramifications of losses. They just don't. They want to water down the meaning of their losses. And frankly, that's not what college football is. College football is a sport where your losses do matter. And if you ever get to the point where essentially the non-conference games are just exhibitions because you make the playoff on how you do in conference game, well, then you might as well not play the game. You were literally risking injury for no reason. There's certainly nothing to be gained by winning. And by the way, we see that with Georgia. Georgia beats Oregon 49-3 in 2022. Essentially got no credit for it. No one ever brought that back up as a data point for Georgia. They certainly didn't bring that back up in 2023 when they beat, or I should say 2024, and they beat Clemson 34-3. By the end of the season, it just gets forgotten. It gets lost in the ether. The non-conference games, even as it stands right now, are, I would say, kind of on shaky ground. But the idea that, we're going to expand the playoff, therefore our losses don't matter as much. Well, once you've done that, it certainly creates a higher quality of life for coaches. But the thing that has made the sport special, it has been eroded in such a way that I don't know that you could rebuild that.
Yeah, my only thought was, man, those home and homes with Florida State, Ohio State, Clemson, I want to see those games in the regular season. Is this what we would need to do to keep those games? Because I don't believe if you go 16 teams that those games are going to exist. That's the only point I wanted to make on the show that I've been thinking about. If you're going to dump Louisville home and home, which it seems imminent to me, then why were you going to play Clemson, Ohio State if there's only 16 teams? But if you feel like you can,
I don't think they're playing those games either, for what it's worth. Okay. I don't think they're playing. Right. I don't think they're playing Clemson. I think all of the non-conference schedules that Kirby Smart added a few years ago, I think one by one in order, they're going to all go away. I don't think that Georgia's playing any of those games, and frankly, I'm not quite so sure that it should. Just for all the reasons that I just mentioned. But I'll turn it back around and ask you this. And look, I think that either answer is fine. I just think it's an interesting debate. Would you rather see Georgia play Florida State, or would you rather see Georgia play LSU more frequently? Because that's what this really comes down to, is that when it was an 8-game conference schedule, Georgia was pretty aggressive with its non-conference scheduling. But if you're going to schedule more SEC games, well, something's got to go away. So it stands to reason, okay, well, Georgia was happy playing 8 conference games and in many years 2 Power 4 non-conference games, Tech plus somebody else. So what's better for college football? What's better for the Georgia fan? Is it to see a regional opponent, non-conference game like Florida State or a Notre Dame, as Georgia did in 2017, 2019? Or is it these SEC teams that Georgia almost never plays? Because you probably can't have it both ways, at least the way the world currently is. You can't say, why does Georgia never go to College Station? How come Alabama never comes here? Blah, blah, blah. And then also play the non-conference games too, unless you're going to play a 16-game schedule, which maybe one day we will. But for now, you got to pick or choose. So what do you think is better? Is it more conference opponents more frequently? The ratings for those are outstanding. Or is it the sort of non-conference stuff that we oftentimes see at the beginning of the season?
Well, I think the toothpaste is out of the tube. There's a 9-game schedule. We're not going backwards. There's going to be more money in the television contract. That means more revenue. That means a higher distribution. It's going to elevate the SEC to get a little closer to the Big Ten money. So that is going to happen. That decision has been made that they will play a 9-game schedule. What I'm suggesting to you is that if you want to maintain those marquee non-conference home and homes, the solution to that is to expand the playoff. To your point, the coaches want that because they want those losses, quote unquote, watered down. Absolutely. Because we saw last year that if you lose 3 games, even if you play a hell of a schedule, even if you beat the University of Georgia, as Ole Miss and Alabama did, they're still going to take a team with 1 less loss from a lesser conference. So if you expand the playoff to 24 or 28 teams, that's the poison that you have to swallow to maintain these interesting home and homes. Also, I think what Kirby alluded to is now you can manage your team differently. For example, I'm looking at Mykel Williams last year. Mykel Williams played against Alabama. He was not ready to play against Alabama. He didn't have a tackle in the game. He was not healthy. But because of the structure, because of the importance of the game, if you have a 24 or 28 game schedule, 24 or 28 team playoff that also includes play-in games, now all of a sudden Kirby starts, hey, I don't need to play this kid hurt. Don't get me wrong, Georgia's going to try to win every game. And if you're saying, Mike, you are talking about the NFL model here, I would say yes. Yes, I am. Because the point Kiffin made was you've got 12 teams out of 137 that make the playoff. You look at the NFL, and I don't have the number off the top of my head, but isn't it somewhere like 14 out of 32?
That's right.
So, and I'm not suggesting that we go there for football to that extreme, but even college basketball, you have 68 teams out of 368. College football right now, and if we're going to measure, and this is another question I'd throw back to you, do we measure success now on whether or not a team makes the playoff? If that is the measurement, then I do think there would be some merit to it. I'm like UBA. I'm a traditionalist. I didn't want to see this go this way, but we're here now. And now that we have a 9-game schedule, and now that we've got a committee that are picking these teams, I hated seeing SMU get in the playoff ahead of Ole Miss, Alabama, and South Carolina last year.
All right, so in the time we have left, let me just shift gears and make this a simple question for you. What's it going to take for Georgia to beat Alabama on Saturday? What are your keys to victory for UGA in that game?
Brandon, I think turnovers, man. I mean, we can say what we want about Alabama's schedule. Georgia's schedule, hadn't been the greatest either, if we're being honest about it. Georgia's got 4 turnovers this year. Alabama doesn't have any. You've got to affect the quarterback. And against Tennessee, the red flag to me was that they only had 1 sack. Now, Kirby pointed out you didn't get him into down and distance. There weren't a lot of third down opportunities. Why is it going to be any different this week? One of the things that Georgia has done tremendously well, and the next guy you got coming up on the program can really speak well to this. What a great expert we have every week on DawgNation Daily. But Georgia is a team that affects the quarterback. You play the Dogs, your guy's going to get hit. That quarterback's bringing a little bit of extra Advil, et cetera, and whatever painkiller, because he knows after the game he's going to take this before he gets on an airplane. That didn't happen against Tennessee. I think Georgia has to get to Ty Simpson. If they don't get to Ty Simpson, this guy has shown us he can put it on the money. He does have mobility. He does see the field, and he's got 2 great dynamic receivers. You have got to hit what do they say? The quarterback must go down, Brandon. The quarterback must go down. Conversely, in the Georgia offense, Kirby told us at the beginning of the year, no secret, hey, they got to run the ball. Gunnar Stockton is not Joe Montana. He's not going to sit in the pocket and throw the ball 36 times and make that perfect throw and win those 1 possession games every week. You're not going to make your living like that. They have got to establish balance. They have got to be able to run the ball effectively so that they can stay in positive down and distance and keep that defense and run past conflict. So shrinking it down, you got to get the quarterback's got to go down. And conversely, for Georgia to win the football game, they've got to establish the run. For Alabama to win the game, they've got to continue to play clean, no turnover football, force Gunnar Stockton into those catastrophic mistakes, those strip sack fumbles. We saw it against Notre Dame. We saw it against Tennessee. They got to get to Gunnar. They got to keep Georgia in down and distance situations, and they got to stay clean and not turn the ball over.
I think that's it. Really well said, Mike. Good stuff. Thanks for being here today. Looking forward to seeing you in Athens on Saturday. Great coverage. And, of course, appreciate you being here on DawgNation Daily, presented by Breda Pest Management today.
Can't wait, Brandon. Thanks, man.
Good stuff.
Let's take a look around the rest of the league. This is SEC Through.
All right, really good stuff from Mike Griffith. And as he said, we'll have Davin Bellamy here coming up in just a moment. That's going to be a lot of fun. Prior to that, though, let's get ready to go cruising around the SEC, courtesy of Royal Caribbean. I got to tell you, man, so much fun and exciting stuff happening at Royal Caribbean here right now. And I got to tell you, when my voice is not working too well, and sometimes it just sort of feels like you just need to need a break. I'd love nothing more than to be on a Royal Caribbean cruise vacation right now. I'd love to be on Star of the Seas because of the amazing entertainment options that Star of the Seas has for you. Did you know on Star of the Seas, many of the Royal Caribbean ships have a Broadway-style show you can see? Well, right now, first run style, right there in Star of the Seas, you can see Back to the Future, the musical. Can you believe this? You can go on board Star of the Seas. You can see the show. It's at no additional charge, including your cruise fare. Get a chance to be a part of this amazing spectacle. My understanding is the DeLorean actually flies in the theater, which is wild. It's just an amazing thing. And it's the level of entertainment that Royal Caribbean's famous for. No one turns up the volume on incredible entertainment options while you're on board than Royal Caribbean. An amazing thing when it comes to all of this. So it's a great time for you to be on Star of the Seas and experience all the great things that Royal Caribbean has to offer. Give Jessica Slater a call. She can tell you more about it. 770-718-9147. That's 770-718-9147. You can also email her, jslater@dreamvacations.com. What this is what she is a travel advisor. She doesn't work for Royal Caribbean, she works with them. And Royal Caribbean said, hey, this is who we want you to trust for booking all of your Royal Caribbean cruise vacation needs. Jessica Slater, the one there on that. So make sure you reach out to her when you're ready to take a Royal Caribbean cruise vacation. Once again, 770-718-9147, or you can email her, jslater@dreamvacations.com. So as we look ahead to Week 5 in college football, let me tell you one of the things that I've noticed, and we will watch as this changes here this weekend. Thus far, we don't have much of a prevailing storyline with the sport here right now. It looked like last week maybe we're getting that when it comes to, like, say, the emergence of Oklahoma and John Mateer. Maybe Mateer looks like the Heisman quarterback. Lo and behold, now he's having hand surgery. He's going to be out for a while. You put that on pause. You've had other things that seem like they're popping up, and maybe they're true. A little bit of Miami, a little bit of Florida State out of the ACC. Maybe that continues. But overall, the prevailing narrative that dominates the season has not taken shape yet. But don't you get the feeling that maybe this weekend is one of those times when that could happen? Now, obviously, if Georgia beats Alabama, and if it's now 4-0, as we talked to Connor about yesterday, undefeated through September, with a road win at Tennessee and a coveted win against the Crimson Tide, then Georgia, in many ways, is becoming part of the prevailing storyline for the season. We hope that's the case. But aside from Georgia right now, there are also other things that are going to take place where you're going to be forced to say, okay, well, this is a real thing that's happening, and this is something we've got to give strong consideration to. Let me give you a couple from the SEC. Magnolia Bowl is on Saturday. Ole Miss hosting LSU. Now, as we joked about with Kaylee Manziel on video briefly yesterday, obviously some of this is impacted by the dating relationship between Lane Kiffin's daughter and the star LSU linebacker Whit Weeks. We don't do TMZ style stuff here. I'm happy to give the dating game clicks over to somebody else. Happy to cede that market to somebody else. But from a football standpoint, this is a pretty big one here, because in the case of LSU, the Week 1 win against Clemson does not look as good as it once did. We understand that. The game against Florida where they won, Brian Kelly's message after the game was, after being criticized for some bad offensive play, you ought to be happy with just winning. But then Florida has lost again since then. So LSU's got the record, but the performances were at least questioning just a bit here right now. But if you go on the road and you win at Ole Miss, well, obviously at that point, you've demonstrated that the big aggressive spinning the transfer portal, the attempt to overhaul the defense, the attempt to build around Garrett Nussmeier, well, clearly that through the first quarter poll of the regular season seems like it's taking shape here pretty well. This is a big game for LSU on Saturday at Ole Miss. Conversely, it's a big game for the Rebels too, who've dealt with injuries at quarterbacks, and now they've they've been sort of up and down all season. Some of the games not exactly, winning in impressive fashion, but still winning. So big game in the Magnolia Bowl on Saturday, Ole Miss hosting LSU. One of the teams it certainly looks like I was potentially very wrong about is Texas A&M. I told you I'm not quite so sure about the vibe around A&M. Well, then they go on the road and they win at Notre Dame. Thrilling game, wild game, but they did win it. And now they get a chance to come back home and get a chance to host Auburn. Now, I still think that Auburn's slightly more dangerous than folks realize. They had the tough situation, at Oklahoma. Now they got to play back-to-back road games. Never an easy thing to do, especially when you're talking about long travel. But I still think that Auburn is a semi-dangerous team, but they're obviously in a tough spot here with, once again, forced to travel and facing an A&M team that I probably undersold to begin the season. If A&M wins this, then it really is, I would say, in the eyes of plenty, legitimately true that A&M was just undervalued, that A&M really is ready to be much more of a player in the SEC race than I certainly gave them credit for before the season began. That's pretty interesting. I'll also mention Tennessee going to Mississippi State on Saturday. Keep in mind, there's a win total that each team has. It's their over-under. You can bet it before the season begins. Did you know that Mississippi State's win total to begin the season was 3.5? They've already exceeded their season-long win total, and we're not even out of the month of September yet. They host Tennessee on Saturday. If you are Tennessee here, be very, very careful. I'll also mention one final thing. Obviously, the biggest game, other than Georgia-Alabama this weekend, is, of course, Penn State hosting Oregon. And pretty quietly, Oregon has been really dominating lesser competition here thus far. If Oregon goes to Happy Valley and wins, which I think they probably will, I'm not a huge believer in Penn State, but maybe I'm wrong about that too. Certainly that could be a signal that Oregon is ready to be taken very seriously too. The point is, to wrap this up, is that the beginning of this, coming into this weekend, we would say we don't quite yet know what the predominant, prevailing narratives and storylines are around college football. But one way or another, after this weekend, you got to think that some of that's going to start to take shape. We'll make that cruising around the SEC, courtesy of Royal Caribbean. And here on DawgNation Daily, always a thrill for us to get ready to talk to our guy, the great Davin Bellamy, especially in a week like this. Davin, you know big games. You love them. You've played well in them before. And when it comes to Georgia, does not get much bigger than this game against Alabama. And the one thing we've heard from folks all week, they want you to tell us how this defense gets going. Let me set it up for you this way. Most recent game that Georgia played gave up more than 40 points. Most recent home game against a Power 4 opponent, that was Georgia Tech at the end of last season, allowed more than 40 points, although that was also in overtime. Most recent game to Alabama gave up more than 40 points. We are seeing Georgia allowing more than 40 points with a lot more regularity than we once did in the past. How does this Georgia defense bounce back? I think they're going to need to be among the catalysts for victory if Georgia does win. How do you think it happens?
I agree. And, through these last, 3 games, we haven't seen the pass rush be there, consistently. So last week we didn't see a lot of, pressure from Coach Smart just because of the things that, Tennessee does. And we tried to rely on just our front 7 getting there, and we saw how that turned out. So I'm expecting this week, especially with Bama, they're coming in. They don't have any turnovers this year. Their quarterback is playing very well, and they also have those deep threat targets that we struggle with. So this week, I see, Coach Smart probably, heating it up a little bit because our front 7 is just not, getting there. And I think that's just the best way. You kind of want to see it be on tape. I think the only guy who's really showed that he can consistently get after the quarterback is Chris Cole. But we haven't even seen that at a, high clip. The question's still out there, but I think to, combat that, you have to send pressure. We have to send pressure. If we can't get there with 4, then we got to get there with 5 and 6.
Okay, so I think that's a very interesting point. I want to talk about that for a moment because I'm not that smart about most things. I'm certainly not capable of being a football coach. That's just not the knowledge and skill set that I have. So the simple question I would ask to you is, and it sounds like you just answered it, if you've got to have more pass rush against Alabama, and I believe in some form or fashion you do, is it about something the coaches do to scheme it towards happening? Or is this about a guy saying, listen, I'm going to blow up a blocker. I'm going to be a one-man gang and I'm just going to make something happen? Is this on a player to win a battle? Is this on a coach to scheme something into existence? Sounds like you think it's more about finding a way to apply the pressure from a strategic coaching standpoint.
Right. Usually you want to see, if you have the guys. If we got 4 guys that can go get them, that means we have more guys in coverage and it just works better. But over the course of the season, you start to download that info. And right now, it's just not saying that we have 4 guys that can consistently get after the quarterback. So that's where it comes into scheme, where you want to see Georgia use those, multiple fronts, line guys up, in the A gap and just send 7 or just send, all out blitzes. But I'm pretty sure Coach Smart is hesitant to do that because shown last week, one-on-one deep balls.
Yeah.
I mean, if you send pressure, do we trust our DBs to be one-on-one on these 40-yard shots to Ryan Williams? He showed last year, versus us, that he can take the top off. So hopefully we have an answer, for that. But, I look at that Notre Dame game that, I played my year. That last drive, we only rushed 4. That whole game, we only rushed 4. It wasn't really a lot of pressures. Coach Smart challenged me and Zoe on Monday, in the team meeting. He put up both the tackles. He said, you guys think you're so good. You walk around here with your head high. Well, here's your first test. You're going against the best. You're going against the best O-lineman. He's the top 10 pick. Go show the world who you are. And we took that as a challenge where we said, Coach, don't bring no pressure. You call me out. I want to line up on Mike McGlinchey's side, and I want to give it to him every play. That was the mindset. So through all the conversation that we've been having, I'm pretty sure the Dogs know, and I'm pretty sure Coach Smart has challenged them like he challenged us. And we were actually doing well in the sack number when it was time to play, Notre Dame. He still found a way to challenge us. So I'm pretty sure these guys are not only hearing it from the media, but they're hearing it from inside the locker room, of you have to hold up your end of the bargain. The front 7 job, those big guys, they eat up, double teams and they stop the run. The edges, go get the quarterback and affect the quarterback and make your DB's job way, way, easier. So if we can't do it with the front 4, we're going to have to bring pressure, and that's going to need for those back end guys to step up because it's going to be a lot of one-on-one opportunities.
That's such a great story, Davin. I appreciate you telling me that. As somebody who played in this Kirby Smart defense, this is the perception I have. You tell me if it's true. That Kirby does like to get quarterback pressure and likes to do things to create pressure, but the trade-off is not at the expense of allowing explosive plays. That it's kind of like a non-football coach, hey, I may want to bet on a football game, but I can't afford to bet money I can't afford to lose.
Right.
That Kirby approaches the same thing with football of, boy, I want to be a little risky every now and then, see if we can get after a quarterback, but not at the expense of giving up big plays. That he is if I would describe it this way, you tell me if I'm correct, a risk-averse coach when it comes to how much pressure can we get without making ourselves vulnerable in the back end. Do you feel like that's a fair description?
Definitely. And, Coach Smart reminds me of, Greg Williams. And, I kind of find out through Greg Williams that Coach Smart was actually a GA for him. So when I started playing for Greg Williams, I started saying, this is where I heard this from. So kind of with their attitudes, they call the game based off their attitudes. And Coach Greg Williams always used to, apologize to us if he called, cover 0 because he was pissed off and a bomb went over the top. He said, that was on me. I was pissed off. I can't call the game versus how I'm feeling. Well, I think, over the years, Coach Smart has calmed down to that level of not bringing so much pressure just because that's his personality. Go get him. Go get him. He's kind of learned to, be situational with that. And it just depends on your personnel. Last year we had, Malachi Starks back there, a guy who was just a big cover for the defense. So even if your DBs messed up, you still had a guy back there who was a first-round pick who could play multiple positions that could cover up a lot of mistakes. And then you also had guys who went first round of the draft, Mikael and Jalen Walker, those guys can go get the quarterback. So if I bring 5 or 6, now I'm creating those one-on-one matchups where Mikael and Jalen aren't getting double teamed. So I know if I call this blitz, it's going to get home because I'm creating a one-on-one. I think this year the problem is if we do send 6 or 7 and we're creating these, one-on-ones, which player is going to win their one-on-one? We haven't seen players win their one-on-ones in the front 7 the first 3-4 games. And then on the back end, like we saw, last year, it's I won't call them young guys, but when it comes to playing time, they are. So I think you got to be a little bit more, hesitant this year of bringing pressure because who are we creating those one-on-one, matchups for a guy that's going to win, at a high clip? And if they don't get there and we let our guys on the back end, with cover 0 and they can't make a play, on a 50-50 ball, that goes back to the DC. So it's just trying to protect the player and the personnel. Last year you had that ace piece with Jalen Walker, and I hate how the Falcons are even using him, just sticking him on the edge. He's a guy that plays multiple positions. You want to use him on third downs and rush him from all over the place. This year, I think the Dogs are still trying to find that guy on the defense who's a designated pass rush where they can set up calls to get him, in those, one-on-one situations. But just this year, I think the personnel has kind of calmed, Kirby down with his play calling.
Let me just squeeze in one more, and you've been great today. I appreciate that. We talked about this the other day. You go back and look at the high water for Georgia in sacks. That's 2021. They had 49. 15 of those came from inside linebackers. Now, my perception is if you're getting inside linebacker sacks, that's Nakobe, that's Channing Tindall, Quay Walker had a couple, that you probably are sending some sort of pressure to get those inside linebacker sacks. So that, what I would say, is a statistical piece of evidence to say that sometimes they do know how to dial it up in just the right way. And we saw this in the Texas game a year ago, back when you were still doing a lot of the defensive line stemming. Defensive line moves over, inside linebackers just sort of appear out of nowhere, almost like a horror movie, where they just sort of show up right behind the stem. That they do kind of know how to dial that interior pressure up with the inside linebackers. Maybe we get some of that on Saturday too.
Yeah, man, we're going to need to. We're going to need to. And I don't want to, harp or sound like I don't have any confidence, but I just haven't seen it. I just haven't seen, a guy go win. Just win. It don't matter the call. That's your guy. You're in the phone booth with him. Get out. And we haven't seen that. So in order to, just force Bama to have some turnovers or, slow down, Ty Simpson, the number one, kryptonite for, a QB is pressure. And like we saw last week, if he can sit back there and bake cakes, and have smoke breaks and then throw the football, we're going to be, in a world of trouble. So this week we're going to have to dial it up.
Hey, great stuff, Davin. Appreciate you as always. Really, really strong analysis. Can't wait to hopefully see a Georgia victory on Saturday. Come back and talk to you about that next week. Thanks for your time here today, and enjoy the weekend.
No doubt, man. Go Dogs.
Go Dogs, indeed. I'll tell you what, that was great. Great stuff from Davin Bellamy. Really, really strong. Really appreciate that. If I can't talk, I'm glad we have others around here who can, and Davin certainly delivered it in a huge way right there. Hey, how about we go back and, for a golden shoe today, we talked for a while about the embarrassment of Florida. Always a fun thing to re-rack here. We continue to get great submissions on this, including some we haven't had a chance to get to yet. The idea of after the spitting incident involving the Florida player, the golden spittoon, UGA Nation 412 wrote in to say, here you go, BA. Gators going to be spit shining Georgia's golden shoes again very soon. And yes, indeed, that's the case. You see the golden spittoon. You see the golden shoes on the Georgia Bulldog. The very sad Florida Gator forced to shine them up. Really good stuff from UGA Nation 412. Very clever guy always. We'll give him a golden shoe for that here today. And how about those lousy, stinking Gators? Up at the Gator Hater update, about 1,782 days. That's how long it's been since Florida's beaten Georgia. That is your Gator Hater updater. You'll have a great day. Back tomorrow, DawgNation Daily, presented by Breda Pest Management. And on video, we're ready to do our R.S. Andrews cool down here. And as we did yesterday, I'm going to get ready to pass the baton. Our guy Cody Chafin's kind enough to join us here on all of that. And Cody, as I get ready to pass it over to you, I guess I will ask you here. Obviously, you're going to be on the field on Saturday. You get the video camera ready to go. Some of the best images we get come from these night games, things like that. What's your sense of anticipation right now for the atmosphere that you're going to be chronicling for us on video on Saturday? I get the impression it's going to be unlike maybe anything we've seen before.
It's going to be so nuts. I'm getting excited about it. It was funny this morning as I'm getting ready. I'm like, all right, how am I going to shoot this, right? Like, because you only get these certain moments at certain time. All right, do I go up top to the top of the stadium? I get that shot? I've got a shot that I got a couple weeks ago that you guys have not seen yet.
Okay.
Of the team running out that I'm excited. So trying different things, but this is one of those moments. We saw it yesterday in the thumbnail they put behind you is the great wide shot of Sanford Stadium with the fireworks going off. So that's my thought. The problem is with it being so crazy, I got to work through 93,000 to get back to the field in time for kickoff. So
and we do have
some of those things.
We do have now we got to figure out if we can really execute this, I guess. But we do have a camera angle, right, that we might be able to show that we've never shown before. Is that fair to say? Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yes, we have the weather cam that we showed on the cool down a few weeks ago. So we'll have something like that. Maybe we can roll on that too. I like that idea. So look at us planning things out.
Just on the fly, just like that.
And maybe we make Kaylee carry that camera from pregame somewhere.
That's a great idea too. Anytime we get a chance to get her like a pack mule and just hauling stuff, all over the place, I'm always in favor of that.
So much gear.
Well, let me just say this: I appreciate you doing the cool down. I'm sorry to have to ask folks to step in for me. I do not like that at all, but I certainly appreciate it, and there's no better person to do it than you, Cody. So with that said, I will get ready to pass the baton over to you.
All right, appreciate it, Brandon. It's so much to go through today. Watching the comments and watching you guys, I think everybody really loved what Davin had to say today. He's going to tell it like it is. That's the one thing about having Davin Bellamy on the show every week is he's not going to sugarcoat it. You cannot get after the quarterback, so what are you going to do? Are you going to send pressure and leave a guy on an island? I do think that it would be malpractice if Kalen DeBoer and Ryan Grubb did not test some of those Georgia cornerbacks. Kirby Smart saying last night they're trying to do, they know that's a challenge. Those guys have gotten the message in that cornerback room that they're going to be tested this week. It's going to be Ryan Williams. It's going to be Jeremy Bernard. What can you do to stop those guys? And they're going to try you for sure. Looking at some of the other comments here, rolling through, and you guys a lot to say about what Mike Griffith had to say about the scheduling model and the potential of a even bigger playoff, a 26, 28 game college football playoff. Would that add back in those out-of-conference games, which we've come to enjoy? The one thought I had about that is it was interesting to me, now that you've got Texas and Oklahoma in there, you're almost getting a little bit more. If you're going to have to play those teams, those were out-of-conference games. Georgia had scheduled to go to Oklahoma. So you're getting some of that anyway with an expanded SEC schedule, but it is something to think about that, we're not going to see Georgia FSU, or we're not going to see Georgia Ohio State in the regular season. But if you have an expanded playoff, you're also going to see more of that in the play. Even with 16 teams, you're going to get to see Georgia play Clemson potentially in the playoffs. You're going to get to see, Ohio State come down and play LSU. You're going to get some of those out-of-conference games that we were used to seeing. You're just going to see them in the first round of the playoffs. And the implications then, like Brandon said, if it doesn't mean anything out-of-conference regular season, then why play the game? It's going to mean a lot more if you get those in the playoffs, and that's something to think about. We are going to see more crossover with an expanded playoff. All right, looking through Spencer Clark, Dan Jackson showed y'all how to hit. We sure know about Dirty Dan. And how about the love also this week for Tate Ratledge up there, graded out in the 90s in the PFF for Lions on Monday Night Football. Everybody in the NFL circles. It's interesting to watch my Twitter because I follow all of that stuff. It's all the guys in the NFL who have no tie to Georgia who are just touting singing the praises of Tate Ratledge. Really cool. So Jonathan calling me out. I thought yesterday Billy had a hotter seat than Gundy. Gundy don't got a seat anymore. So you're right. I thought about that as soon as that news came out. Some folks were saying it's a tough year for Hare getting coaching as you get the Virginia Tech coach out of there, and also Mike Gundy. And then Mateer's got a great flow, and he had bad news come down yesterday. I want to see UGA Miami way before Beck. It would be fun to see later. 2020 schedule is DMAR. 42 says 27 schedules and say no way we keep FSU, Louisville, but LSU, Bama, Texas Tech, Texas A&M, and usuals that season alone. Yeah, that season looks crazy. So look into some of the schedules, and we won't get the dates on all of these, but I start thinking DawgNation invasions, right? All these places we can go and the things we can do with the DawgNation and the events that we do now. Go Take Go, says Miriam Corbin. Appreciate that. Yep. I don't care if we ever beat Bama again as long as we get back to winning national championships and they stay out of the playoffs. If that's the one you lose, you're okay with that, Chris? Interesting there. Davin and Cinch are more blunt than Jake. Terrence has his own agenda, it says. So interesting. Everybody has their takes. DT talking about that on DawgNation.com, who their favorite analysts are. And I do like that we have the mix, right? We got a little bit of everybody on. If you don't like Connor and you like Mike, or if you don't like Stinch and you like Terrence, or you got Jake, you got Davin, you got kind of different generations of dogs in there as well. You got the former player, you got the analyst. So it's fun, the group that Brandon brings in guest-wise every week. You're not going to get just kind of the same old if you watch every day. What if, Chef J-Bone, what if UGA beats Bama every time they play for the rest of this decade? That would mark the end of the Bama fans believe they're still relevant. I totally agree. Did you see the Bama dynasty made it on SEC Shorts this week as something that is sent out to pasture? That was interesting. OKC Sports Radio complaining about OU having to play Georgia. And that's one thing that I think Connor Riley brought up really well on last night's show. If you didn't miss it, we had a full reaction show to the schedule with Kaylee Mansell and Connor Riley talking last night. And one of the things Connor said is everybody who's playing Georgia's schedule looks tougher because they're playing Georgia. Georgia can't play Georgia. So it's one of those things that nobody's going to be happy when UGA shows up on their schedule every year, and that's a good thing to have, right? You don't want to be it's okay. It's just Mississippi State or Kentucky or even South Carolina. I think we feel okay. Nobody wants to have Georgia on their schedule. Miriam Corn like to hear all the takes, even if I don't agree. And that's part of it too, right? Like, I like that Mike could say something that may piss you off, but that's okay, right? Like, because you want people to be bringing you these different ideas, and sometimes it does make you think about things in a different way. Question for DawgNation, says SEM Dog. With the SEC moving to 9 conference games, should Tech be moved to the first game of the year? It's an interesting thought. It's something that Mike has talked about a lot, and that was kind of when there was this initial talk of like that last week, would they do a crossover game to play 4 versus 1 to see who gets in the playoff and all that. That's when we thought Georgia Tech would have to move maybe to the front of the schedule. It's tough because there's such tradition, right? Whether it was like the JV teams playing on Thanksgiving or, it's just, I always picture the red and the gold clashing together in the cold. Could it be moved to the beginning of the year? It definitely could. And that would give you one of those non-conference. If Georgia Tech is not this year Georgia Tech or last year Georgia Tech, it's always kind of a nice thing to have there was, 2 years ago, Brock Bowers didn't have to play. They didn't have to put him out there as he was a little bit injured before the SEC championship. So sometimes there was that. If Jeff Collins had come back, we'd love to play him right before the SEC championship every year. I wonder if Mike and interesting stuff. Cody, I appreciate you, Miriam, saying that. Dogs need to turn it up a few notches on Saturday night. Go Dogs beat Bama Silver Britches. I think the other part of this, we've known this game for a while, and this is one that everybody said they're coming to this one or Texas. I think a lot of people, the thought of tailgating on a day that's not going to be freezing in November is going to be better. Now, I did see folks talking in here earlier today about the weather, and it made me think, because I'm the guy on the field with the camera gear, looking at, just Google weather. It says Saturday's high 75. It shows rain, but it shows the 30%, the higher percent chance of rain earlier in the day. By the time we get to 10 o'clock, which the way these games go, maybe the first quarter still, it says 0% chance. So it's going to tail off throughout the day. So it may be wet early on. But hopefully we stay dry. I think back to no, Garrison, I did not know, Robert. I I think back to 2015, that game was a monsoon, Georgia and Alabama, and that's all we're going to say about that. Although they did ask Kirby about that game last night. And again, I don't know if you heard Brandon's kind of comment. Kirby said last night he doesn't want to do these Tuesday night press conferences anymore because he's got more game planning to do. So interesting that. But yeah, poor Cody. Thanks, you, Jimmer. It is sometimes it's always great, right? That's the thing. Oh, it could be hot, it could be raining. I could get stuff thrown at me. It's always great to be on the field. You're never going to complain about that. But the rain, I got to protect the equipment. That's the only part I think about. But talking about 2015, Kirby said, yeah, he remembers that day because, of course, he was an assistant at Alabama at that time. He remembers that day because his defensive lineman got mad at the linebackers because they gave up over 100 yards of rushing, and they almost got in a fight, and they were up, 25 or 30 or whatever they were in that game. Would rather see UGA play Tech the week of Thanksgiving no matter what, says Bill Camacho. I think there's something to it, but the SEC, we'll see how that plays out. A loss to Georgia Tech late in the year, does that feel different than an SEC loss? Potentially, if you were to lose one of those games, I don't know. I don't know if that affects your playoff status at that point. If the team would wear black, there'd be 0% chance we'd lose this time. I cannot see. Part of the reason that I think they won't wear black is Kirby, when they, 2008, they did the blackout. Julio Jones came in there and they did what they did. That was the week we got they're wearing black because they're going to a funeral that was leaked out of Alabama practice. I think Kirby knows how much it motivated Alabama that Georgia was doing a blackout that night. And I think for that reason, he didn't want to give anybody else any of that motivation. That's why we won't see Georgia do that. In-state rivals, interfamily, both teams on Turkey Day. It always makes Turkey Day fun. I've got my uncle went to Georgia Tech. My brother-in-law went to Georgia Tech. Getting everybody around the table, my wife and my sister-in-law are Georgia. My dad's a Georgia guy. So everybody gets together. That makes it fun to have that this week. Is BA in my ear? No, BA is not talking. He is shut down for the day, and that's a good thing. We're trying to get BA all mended up. It's going to be a long season. We're going to be going into January, middle January, God willing, for these dogs. So we get Brandon on the all healed up here. And that's one of those things, it's like all the players, right? It's season's long. You got to manage those injuries. Can you play at 80%? That's what Kirby Smart said. He said, I can tell you who the best offensive lineman is if they're all out there at 100%. But when you got one guy at 85 and you got one guy, a little bit less. So that's why they called me, and I'm not never going to beat Brandon 100%, but am I at 33%? Yeah, maybe they could put me in. So here we get me filling in a little bit. We ain't wearing black jerseys. Forget about it, says Joseph. I appreciate it. I don't think anybody's going to want to. I think black jersey. Everybody's okay with the fans can wear black, and it looks cool even with the fans just wearing black. And it almost, if you look at some of the photos from the Tennessee game last year, it almost makes the red pop more to have the black backdrop of all the fans. It almost, to me, looks even cooler with the red jerseys on the black. Give us a top 3 players for the Dogs you need to see something from this weekend. Let's say Gabe Harris. We got to get after the quarterback, do something there. It can be anybody on that edge rushing group, but we got to see somebody make a play. And I don't care if that's how they're sending pressure. We got to see something from Gunner, right? Like, you got to follow it up. That's the thing. You did it against Tennessee. Everybody's singing your praises for 2 weeks, but you got to follow that up. So you got to see something for Gunner, and that's the easy answer right there. And let's say Ellis Robinson. Let's say, let's shut down. We know they're not going to throw it at Dalen Everett. If you have Robinson or Harris on the other side, they're going to pick on that guy, whoever it is. So let's see Ellis Robinson shut down somebody as well and make them have to think about something else. What's funnier, Tennessee throwing mustard and golf balls or Texas water bottles and beers? Funnier is Tennessee. Throwing the French's mustard. And I guess French's somehow is related to Tennessee. It was up in one of the boxes that had a French's logo. So I'm sure somebody's sponsored there. But the golf balls, like who brought in a golf ball unless you thought about throwing that on the field? That's funnier. It's way more dangerous, but it's funnier to me to have the. Got to get going, says Bill Camacho. Appreciate it. Wearing my red Gunnar Stockton jersey, Andrew Sisson. It was funny. I don't know if you heard on Monday's shows. I spent the weekend back up in enemy territory. Took the kids to Dollywood, and all the dog fans, they love to find. We love to find each other, right? Like somebody's wearing red, sparks up a conversation. I talked to so many dog fans, and they want to talk. I talked to a guy who's from Rabun County, and the amount of pride that comes from the folks in Rabun County right now, knowing that Gunnar Stockton's from there. I drove up 441 to go to Dollywood. The big signs all throughout Clayton and Tiger. They're so proud of Gunnar Stockton. Of course, retired his jersey up there last weekend at their home game for the Wildcats. So really cool to see what he is doing for that part of the world. Probably the same thing that happened when Stetson in Pierce County, and the pride that comes from having that be your guy. And that's the one thing about, Kirby Smart has recruited more nationally than he ever has, but it's always fun. Davin Bellamy, who's on the show, went to my high school. It's such a point of pride to have a guy that's from your school. And there's so many guys from all over the state. You got to keep some of that, because I think that's what makes Georgia special. And I think expanding the scholarships out a little bit, Georgia's picking up more of those guys. And you'll hear about it on Before the Hedges tonight with Jeff and Kaylee. But Georgia seems to be picking up more of those guys who are lifelong dog fans. And that's such a cool thing to me, because these are guys who normally would be walk-ons. Now you're getting a little bit higher quality of a guy because you can offer him a scholarship. So looking at some of those guys, and you want to get a guy who's a lifelong dog fan and maybe from here so he doesn't transfer out. But it's really fun to kind of see all of those Georgia people, and again, it gives you that hometown pride a little bit to know. Yeah, Jacob Alexander mentioned the Bears. Chef Jay Bowens going tomorrow night for the lights at Dollywood. There you go. After dark. So I had to call a high school football game Friday night. We drove up Saturday. It's a long day for my kids, but we had a great time. We stayed till after dark too. It's something special up there. Let's see. Branch, he's got to be one of those sets up better ones in the future. So we're talking about some Baruch dog. Sorry. Seem to be doing MAC games this year when I get them. Interesting. Met a couple of ladies in Red Lodge, Montana from Columbus, Georgia, and a guy from Ellijay in Yellowstone. Martino dog sharing it. I love that, you were out there watching DawgNation Daily, so we appreciate that. Shout out to Martino dog from that. But dogs are everywhere, and that's the thing, especially now, right? It's such a point of pride to wear red and black around, that people find each other. And that's what I tell people about when you go on like the DawgNation cruise. It is that feeling that you get when you're on vacation and you see somebody in Georgia red and black and you want to have that conversation. It's that feeling over and over multiple times a day, because it's so many Georgia people all on one ship. So you meet so many new people because you're all wearing red and black, and then you can have these conversations and talk about every part of Georgia football, because these guys are going to be able to talk to you about the inside linebacker room and the safety room, and they have so much in-depth knowledge. You get to have deep conversations. That's what it's like on the DawgNation cruise. It's that feeling you get of, another dog fan, but you do it over and over throughout the week. Do a couple more minutes here. Look at what Beck's doing in Miami. Interesting there, Kimberly. See what else we got. UGA Marine. I can see how Brandon, he's got to go through. Everybody wants it. Got to go Dogs in New York City last month. Yeah, that's the thing. It's like, even if somebody don't even want us to stop and have a conversation, just get to go Dogs. It's kind of fun. Is Bo Hughley starting at right tackle? We don't need anyone who is hurt out there. So that's the question, right? And Kirby's, I guess tonight we will start getting the injury reports leading up. So we'll see what they're saying about Ernest Green. Is he good to go? Is he, again, that's the thing you have to balance, right? Is Bo Hughley at 95% better than Ernest Green at 80%? And those are the things you have to do, because it certainly looked like, Ernest needs to be back at 100% to be totally effective. Need a big game from Bowens and Frazier. Joseph Kennedy, yeah, you want to get the ball going. You want to get the dirty yards. Those are going to be your guys first and second down, or getting you those yards and make third down manageable if you get to third down. So that's one of those things. Yeah, you got to be able to run the ball. Six Flags better than Dollywood. Mayo Frost. Interesting thought there. DeMello from my hometown of Swainsboro. Yeah, see, everybody wants to hear about Mac Page. Thank you for chiming in. Everybody has that point of pride. That's my guy. Even if it's a guy from the 90s. You just get some of those guys. Oh, he was, the Stinchcombs are from Parkview, which is on the other side of Stone Mountain from where I grew up as well. And, even being adjacent to some of that is always kind of cool. Frogger, I think everybody wants that Ernest Green that they saw. Frogger 2000 says, anybody seen Ernest Green play well? I think everybody wants to see that freshman Ernest Green that we saw a couple years ago, and he just doesn't feel like he's been healthy since. And if he hadn't been effective because he hasn't been healthy. So, yeah, that's what everybody wants is counting on that when they talk about Ernest Green and could he be an NFL talent and what are all these things. That's what everybody wants to see. So. Got to get Peanut involved, says Cam Griffin on Facebook. Yeah, you got to get Peanut involved too. I would love to see some creative ways. We're still being more creative. And I do think that what's helping some of that is guys like Zach Branch make Mike Bobo look much, much better when we're just throwing a screen and it goes for a long touchdown. DawgNation Drive. Mac Rukavina says, you guys drank DK Royal out of beer last year. That is DawgNation traveling. Y'all were certainly loud wherever you were in that stadium. That was one thing I could turn around and find shots of Dog fans all over the stadium. That is awesome. UGA rivals 1, 2, 3. I say Florida. And I base mine off of people I don't want to lose to because I don't want to hear the other team chirp. It just bothers me the most. Florida's number one just from all the years in Jacksonville, having to leave disappointed and having to hear those people. Georgia Tech, because of family ties, I don't want to hear anything about Georgia Tech. So those are 1 and 2 for me. Number 3 has turned into Alabama. And when you look at the schedule moving forward, the fact that Georgia plays Alabama again next year, it's got to be up there now. Because you're playing them as much as you're playing any of those other rivals, Tennessee or, South Carolina or Auburn. Auburn never really was up there for me. I don't know why it is. I've had terrible memories at Jordan-Hare as well. So there is that. But for some reason, Auburn is just, for me personally, it's never been up there in the top 3. So I would say Alabama has, to this point, because they've also made your life so miserable, at least so recently, whether it's keeping you out of the playoff or Davin was on here, 2017 National Championship. Thanks, Cody, for filling in for an injured BA. Happy to do it. It's kind of my thing. I'm also, playing high school football, 30-30 squad. That's me. Send me in at the end. These are garbage time minutes, but I get to go play. So I'm happy to be on the field today. I appreciate it. I'll wrap it up here in just a few minutes. I appreciate you guys hanging with me today. And we got Go With The Flow coming up later today. It'll get posted later tonight. Kaylee Mansell, I think, is going to sit in for BA hosting that show today. We'll get to get everybody's picks on the big games of the week. And then tonight at 7 o'clock, it'll be Before the Hedges with Kaylee and Jeff. Got a lot to talk about for them. It's not as much 2026 talk. It's talking 2027 now and some of the other stuff moving forward. And also, you got guys still making visits, and what does it all mean? If Ty Boogie's going to go visit Miami, what does that mean? Is he just taking a visit just to go experience something new, or is it something to be worried about? We'll get the latest from Jeff on all of that tonight, so looking forward to hearing what he has to say on some of these guys who are locked in. And then the other thing that's become fun about Before the Hedges is that we're starting to see in Mansell's details every week some of the highlights of the guys that are coming. And so I feel like a lot of times, especially when it was State of Georgia, maybe you knew a little bit about a guy, but now you're recruiting nationally. You want to know, okay, I've heard this name. I've read this article about the dude. I want to see the dude play. And you don't need to go on everybody's huddle. We'll just bring it to you. We'll bring you some of the highlights from each of those guys coming up tonight. That's a fun part of Before the Hedges that we've got going right now. What did Jared Curtis look like this week? Let's see it. Let's not just see the highlights of the whole year. Let's see what he's doing week-to-week basis. DT says, I got Florida, GT, and Auburn. I was on the field at Jordan-Hare when they turned the water cannons on in the mid-'80s. All right, so there you go. You get a moment like that. That is a moment that will make you a canon event. I will hate Auburn the rest of my life. And sometimes it just takes somebody in your life, right? Oh, ex-wife, her father was a big Auburn guy. I'll never like Auburn. So that's all it takes. All right, we're going to wrap it up here for our R.S. Andrews cool down. Appreciate R.S. Andrews. Again, we got Go With The Flow coming up tonight. That's also sponsored by R.S. Andrews. Dari will be on there making his picks. Will he have any picks that go against the grain? He's moved himself up a little bit in some of the standings, so excited about that. But R.S. Andrews, they are Dog Nation, who we depend on for our AC, heating, plumbing, and electrical. You call, they come. It's fixed. Guaranteed. The RS in R.S. Andrews stands for rapid service. Take water heaters. You got a water heater, you need to be replaced. It can be replaced the same day. You're not taking cold showers. It's one of those things. You're getting ready to, hopefully, in a few weeks, turn on the heat for the first time. You want to make sure you feel better about it when you get that funky smell when you turn on the heat the first time. Call R.S. Andrews. Have them come out. Make sure everything is tip-top shape as you get going on that. So thanks to R.S. Andrews. You visit them, rsandrews.com on the internet. And we appreciate you guys joining me for the cool down today. We'll see you right back here. Coming up tomorrow, it's DawgNation Daily presented by Breda Pest Management.